Three phrases only liars cannot resist saying. Mark Twain once whispered into the wind of history, and those words still cut through the noise of time like a blade through silk. They strike a chord, not merely because they speak of dishonesty, but because they reveal the fragile nature of human pride, the trembling mask we so often wear before others. When someone lies, it is not always malice that moves their tongue. It is fear. It is insecurity. It is the desperate attempt to be seen as more than they are. To understand these words is to peer into the theater of human weakness, where truth and pretense battle beneath the dim light of self-preservation. Think of the archetype of the trickster, the figure who bends reality with words. He is clever, persuasive, charming, even. But behind his masks lies a fragile foundation, the terror of being unmasked. He cannot resist those phrases, not because they are powerful in themselves, but because they serve as shields. I would never lie. Trust me. To be honest, they are daggers disguised as promises, empty tokens given to buy trust without earning it. And when you hear them, your intuition stirs, because deep within, the psyche recognizes falseness dressed in borrowed clothing. What Twain understood, and what psychology echoes, is that lies are not merely distortions of reality. They are distortions of the self. They are crafted from shame, from the refusal to face weakness. They emerge from the hunger for validation, from the secret wound of low self-worth. People who utter those irresistible phrases are not merely deceiving others. They are deceiving themselves, clinging to fragile affirmations that they are trustworthy, good, and honest. Yet in repeating those phrases, they reveal their doubt. You have heard them, haven't you? In the quiet corners of conversations, in business deals, in friendships, in promises that felt too polished. Someone leaned forward and said, "Trust me," and something in your chest clenched, a faint warning, a shadow brushing your spine. Why? Because true trust requires no announcement. Authentic honesty does not need a prologue. The soul that is anchored in truth does not lean on phrases to convince others. It radiates a natural certainty that requires no defense. The liar's voice, however, trembles beneath the veneer. Psychology calls it leakage, the small betrayals that slip through tone, body language, word choice. When someone insists, "I would never lie," they confess indirectly that lying is not foreign to them. When they say, "To be honest," they admit unconsciously that what came before was not entirely free of performance. These phrases become cracks in the mask, and Twain, with his keen observation of human absurdity, turned those cracks into eternal wisdom. But here is the paradox. To condemn the liar without compassion is to miss the deeper truth. For every human being has lied, even if only to soften pain, to avoid shame, to protect love. The psychology of lying is not black and white. It is woven into the tapestry of survival. Children learn early that lies can shield them from punishment. Adults carry that lesson forward, weaving subtler deceptions to avoid rejection, to hold fragile identities together. The liar is not simply a villain. He is a mirror, reflecting the universal fear of not being enough. And so the lesson deepens. When Twain warns of those irresistible phrases, he does not merely teach us to spot liars in others. He calls us to examine the words we ourselves cannot resist saying. How many times have you, in a moment of panic, assured someone of your honesty with a phrase instead of with steady action? How often have you spoken words to defend yourself when silence would have spoken louder? This is not an accusation, but an awakening, a reminder that truth requires courage, and courage is rarely easy. Imagine standing at the threshold of self-respect, where no external validation is needed. In that place, you no longer reach for those phrases, because you have no mask to defend. Your words grow fewer, but they grow heavier with meaning. People feel your sincerity not in your declarations, but in the quiet consistency of your actions. in the way your gaze holds steady, in the way your promises breathe and live. To reach that place is to step beyond the liar's irresistible temptation, into a freedom that cannot be faked. Mark Twain's words linger because they expose not just the liar's tongue, but the human condition itself. They remind us that deception, while seductive, is fragile, and that truth, though often harder, carries a quiet strength. To resist the three phrases is not merely to avoid falsehood, it is to embrace a higher form of living, where integrity becomes invisible armor. The liar leans on words, the awakened soul leans on being. There is a peculiar weight that settles in the room when someone insists too loudly on their honesty. The air thickens, as though the psyche itself rebels against the forced performance of truth. The archetype of the liar is not simply a villainous trickster, but a fragmented soul who fears exposure more than punishment. He bends reality not to harm, but to survive. In his trembling phrases lies the echo of a child who once discovered that admission led to rejection. That authenticity invited pain. That child grew into an adult who carries a mask so tightly that it fuses with the skin, and every word becomes both a plea and a disguise. Psychologists often describe lying as a defense mechanism, a subtle dance between shame and desire. The liar utters phrases like, "Trust me," not because he is confident, but precisely because he is not. That insistence, that trembling need for validation, betrays him. For trust is never taken by force. It is surrendered willingly in the presence of consistency. The archetype of the honest man does not need to brandish phrases. His silence carries weight. His promises breathe through the rhythm of his actions. You, too, have felt this difference, the calm steadiness of one who simply is, versus the restless churning of one who must convince. The liar's mask is fragile, for every false word carries the burden of memory. One lie demands another to sustain it, weaving a web so intricate that the liar himself often becomes ensnared. In this entrapment lies the tragedy, a desperate attempt to create freedom through deception, only to forge chains of one's own making. The psyche knows when it is out of alignment, and the body rebels nervous tics, shifting eyes, a stutter in the rhythm of speech. Truth is the natural state of the soul, and when it is fractured, the entire being trembles under the strain. Yet, who among us has not tasted this same temptation? How often have you, cornered by fear, let slip a phrase meant to buy time, to shield the softest parts of yourself? This is where Twain's warning takes on its deepest resonance, not in judging others, but in awakening yourself. To notice the words that fall from your own lips, to catch the reflexive, to be honest before it escapes, is to notice the thin veil you place between your being and the world. Lies are not always grand betrayals. Often, they are small hesitations of the heart, whispered concessions to fear. And so, the liar's archetype becomes our teacher. In observing his struggle, we recognize the cost of denying truth. We see how the hunger for approval corrupts the purity of presence. We see how the need to persuade erodes the power of simply existing in alignment with one's essence. If you crave freedom, if you crave the liberation Twain alluded to, you must learn to release the liar within, not through condemnation, but through compassion and courage. The compassion to forgive the moments you faltered, and the courage to speak without shield or preamble. Imagine a world where words are no longer used as armor, where you stand before others, unmasked, steady, your truth requiring no decoration. In such a world, phrases lose their grip. You no longer reach for "trust me," because trust flows naturally from your actions. You no longer mutter, "I would never lie," because your integrity is so seamless it speaks in silence. You no longer begin with "to be honest," because honesty has become the language of your being. That is the vision Twain's wisdom beckons you toward, not merely suspicion of liars, but the transcendence of lying itself. Consider how relationships shift under this light. Deception breeds distance, even when unnoticed. Truth, though sharp at times, builds intimacy. To live without those irresistible phrases is to live with a steady spine, with eyes that meet others without trembling. And in that authenticity, you awaken something profound in those around you, the permission for them to be truthful too. Lies breed lies, but courage breeds courage. The transformation begins not with exposing others, but with exposing yourself to the raw light of authenticity. The liar, then, is not only a warning, he is a mirror, a shadow, a call to remember who you are without masks. His irresistible phrases remind you of the moments you choose fear over truth, and they whisper a challenge to step beyond, to resist the impulse to defend, and instead let your being speak. For integrity is not a performance, it is a presence. The liar trembles because he is divided. The truthful soul rests because he is whole. There is a moment in every story where the mask slips, even if only for a heartbeat. And in that fracture, the truth gleams through. The liar believes he can maintain control with words, weaving assurances into a cocoon of safety. But words are brittle things when they are not rooted in reality. Each false promise creates tension between the spoken and the unspoken, between appearance and essence. Over time, this tension breaks through in subtle ways: the slight delay before answering, the overeager emphasis on being believed, the compulsive repetition of those three fragile phrases. The archetype of the liar is, at its core, the archetype of the insecure self. He craves belonging, recognition, love, and yet he fears rejection so deeply that he chooses illusion over exposure. In psychology, this is the dance of ego defense, where the conscious mind becomes a guardian, shielding the vulnerable self from perceived danger. But this shield is double-edged. It protects in the moment, but erodes trust in the long run, leaving the liar lonelier than before. When Twain unveiled those phrases, he was not mocking humanity, but exposing the tragic irony of self-sabotage. How, in trying to win trust through insistence, one only arouses suspicion. There is a strange beauty in recognizing this pattern, because it awakens you to the invisible theater of human interaction. You begin to hear beyond the words, to feel the tremor beneath the syllables, to sense the discord between expression and energy. You realize that honesty, when it is true, does not come wrapped in defensive declarations. It arrives quietly, often without adornment, like water flowing downhill. And once you sense this, you cannot unsee it. The world divides itself between those who grasp desperately for trust and those who embody it effortlessly. But this awareness also turns inward, asking you, when have you leaned on those same phrases? Perhaps in a moment of panic, when silence might have revealed your doubt. Perhaps when someone's suspicion pierced too close to your hidden flaws. Perhaps in a fragile attempt to protect the image you wanted others to hold of you. To confront this within yourself is not to drown in shame, but to awaken. For the liar's greatest prison is his inability to see his own reflection clearly. Once you see, you step beyond. The archetype of truth is different. It is not loud, not performative, not restless. It is grounded, patient, unmoved by the tides of opinion. This figure does not need to defend himself with claims of honesty. He allows his life to speak in silence. Think of the calm soul, whose word you never doubt, not because they say, "Trust me," but because trust has been carved into the fabric of their being through consistency. Their promises carry weight, not because of clever phrases, but because they have been lived into reality. And when you choose to embody this archetype, something shifts in your presence. People feel it, even if they cannot name it. They relax in your company because they sense no manipulation. They listen when you speak, not because you demand belief, but because your energy carries the stillness of authenticity. This is power beyond performance, the power of alignment, where your inner world and outer words breathe as one. Imagine conversations where you no longer scramble for credibility, where you no longer lace your sentences with defenses, where you no longer fear exposure. Imagine the relief of speaking without disguise, of trusting that your truth, however raw, is enough. That is the freedom Twain's insight points toward. It is not about outsmarting liars around you. It is about transcending the liar within. For once you rise above the need for those phrases, the world itself responds differently. People trust you without effort. Opportunities flow toward you. Relationships deepen. And the constant tension of performance dissolves into the ease of being real. The liar's 3 phrases are fragile crutches, but you were not born to walk with crutches. You were born to stand tall, to let your truth flow unannounced, to allow your presence to testify louder than words ever could. To break free from those phrases is to break free from fear, and in that freedom lies not just honesty, but wholeness. There is a silent law in human connection. The more one insists on their honesty, the less it rings true. Twain's brilliance was not in merely identifying 3 phrases, but in revealing the psychology behind them, the unspoken desperation of a soul trying to hold together a fractured mask. Each declaration of "trust me" or "to be honest" is not strength, but confession, an unguarded glimpse into insecurity. And it is here that the archetype of the liar becomes most tragic, for he betrays himself even in his attempt to hide. The liar's world is built upon fragile scaffolding. His words may dazzle in the moment, but beneath them lies the constant hum of anxiety. He knows, though perhaps unconsciously, that every false thread must be maintained with another. This cycle weaves a cage around him, a labyrinth of his own design. In Jungian psychology, this is the shadow unacknowledged, the parts of the self that are denied and therefore erupt in distorted ways. Instead of facing weakness directly, he cloaks it in declarations of strength, but the disguise leaks through, becoming louder than the truth he seeks to bury. Yet, within this paradox lies a lesson for you, because the liar is not merely an external figure to be observed or condemned. He lives in subtle echoes within your own story. How many times have you felt the need to defend your integrity with words, rather than let your actions speak? How many times have you softened the truth, not with malice, but with fear? Fear of losing love, fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen too clearly. To recognize this is not to condemn yourself, but to awaken to the quiet ways in which self-betrayal seeps into life. And awakening is power, for once you see the pattern, you gain the choice to break it. The difference between the liar and the honest soul is not perfection, but courage. The liar seeks comfort in the illusion of safety. The honest soul accepts the discomfort of truth, trusting that authenticity builds foundations that deception cannot. It is not that the honest soul never fears rejection. It is that he chooses truth even when fear whispers otherwise. There is a magnetic strength in this choice. People feel it instantly, though they cannot always name it. The one who speaks truth without preamble radiates a steadiness that cannot be faked. He does not announce his honesty. He demonstrates it by consistency. He does not plead for trust. He earns it through the quiet rhythm of his being. Such a person becomes a beacon, not because of their eloquence, but because of their alignment. And alignment is irresistible. Imagine walking through the world with that same clarity. Imagine conversations where your words are not weapons or shields, but simple reflections of your soul. Imagine relationships free from the strain of suspicion, built instead on the quiet comfort of trust. This is not an unreachable fantasy. It is the natural state of living without disguise. It begins the moment you resist the temptation to lace your sentences with those fragile phrases. It deepens each time you allow silence to stand where once you would have defended. In the end, Twain's observation does not merely arm you against liars. It calls you to higher ground. It challenges you to strip away the unnecessary, to release the weight of performance, to embody a truth that requires no decoration. For the liar's words echo with fragility, but the truthful soul speaks with gravity even in whispers. And in that gravity, there is freedom. To see the liar clearly is to recognize the chains of deception. To see yourself clearly is to break them. And beyond those broken chains lies a life of depth, intimacy, and unshakable peace. Every society, every culture has known the liar not just as an individual, but as a symbol of the human struggle with truth. Ancient myths spoke of tricksters who bent reality with cunning words, figures both admired and feared. They charmed, they entertained, they deceived, and in the end, they always revealed something deeper about the human condition. Mark Twain, with his sharp eye for irony, carried this archetype into modern memory, capturing the essence of deception in those three irresistible phrases. And in doing so, he reminded us that lying is not merely about facts and falsehoods. It is about the fragile architecture of identity. When a liar insists, "I would never lie," what is truly being spoken? Not certainty, but desperation. This is the voice of someone trying to hold together the crumbling edges of credibility, layering words upon a shaky foundation. To the trained ear, or even to the intuitive heart, such words do not reassure. They raise suspicion. Human beings are wired to detect incongruence. We sense when tone, expression, and energy do not align. And it is this inner radar that trembles when we hear those phrases, alerting us that truth has been diluted. The tragedy of the liar is that he often deceives himself first. He convinces himself that the words will suffice, that if he repeats the phrases often enough, they will become reality. But self-deception is a poor refuge. Over time, it corrodes self-respect, leaving behind a hollow echo where integrity once stood. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the inner conflict between belief and behavior. The liar claims to value honesty, yet acts against it. This split gnaws at the soul, leaving behind a restless unease that no amount of persuasion can silence. And what of you, listening to these words? Perhaps you recall a time when someone's assurances rang false, and you felt the sting of betrayal. Or perhaps you remember a moment when you yourself leaned on those phrases, speaking them not with malice, but with fear. Both experiences are mirrors, showing the delicate balance between truth and survival. We lie not always to harm, but often to protect, to shield ourselves from shame, to soften the edges of reality, to preserve the image we want others to see. Yet every lie, no matter how small, distances us from freedom. The path beyond lies is not paved with perfection, but with courage. Courage to admit mistakes instead of hiding them. Courage to face discomfort without disguising it. Courage to trust that authenticity, though raw, builds deeper bonds than deception ever could. When you choose this path, you no longer need to announce your honesty. It radiates through your presence, through the steadiness of your gaze, through the alignment between your words and your actions. In this alignment lies a rare strength, the kind that cannot be faked, the kind that commands respect without demand. And here is the profound gift. Truth, once embraced, brings relief. It lightens the spirit, unburdens the mind, and heals the subtle wounds left by dishonesty. To live without the weight of performance is to breathe more freely, to love more deeply, to stand more firmly in the world. You become unshakable, not because you never falter, but because you no longer hide when you do. In such authenticity, even your flaws gain a strange beauty, for they are real, and in their reality, they inspire trust. Twain's warning, then, is not only a guide for spotting deception in others, it is an invitation to transform yourself. It is a challenge to step beyond the fragile phrases, to resist the temptation of self-defense, to let your integrity speak louder than your tongue. For the liar may dazzle in the moment, but only the truthful soul endures. When you step into this way of being, you discover that truth is not a weapon, nor a burden, but a liberation. It frees you from the endless labor of remembering falsehoods. It frees you from the fear of exposure. It frees you from the hunger for constant validation. And in that freedom, life itself becomes lighter, fuller, more luminous. There comes a silence deeper than words, a silence that only truth can hold. In that silence, the weight of deception falls away, leaving behind the raw essence of being. Twain's wisdom guides us here, not merely to suspect the liar, but to recognize the hidden prison that lies build, a prison of self-doubt, of fractured identity, of restless fear. The liar's phrases, irresistible to his own tongue, reveal this imprisonment. "Trust me," he says, but he does not trust himself. "To be honest," he begins, because honesty has become an afterthought. "I would never lie," he insists, because deep within, he knows he already has. This is the great paradox of human deceit. The more one struggles to hold on to an image, the more that image slips away. Integrity cannot be performed, it must be lived, and the psyche, sensitive beyond measure, recognizes when life and language fall out of step. You, too, recognize it, even when you cannot explain why. A sudden unease, a tightening in your chest, a whisper of instinct. It is your spirit discerning the rift between truth and words. We call it intuition, but it is simply the soul's way of protecting itself against the tremors of falsehood. The archetype of the liar serves as a shadow in your own story, a reminder of the temptation to disguise weakness with words. Yet shadows exist only because light is present. If deception is the shadow, then authenticity is the light, the part of you that longs not for validation, but for freedom. To live authentically is to release the need to convince, to stop defending, to let actions breathe where words once suffocated. It is to stand in the quiet power of alignment, where your inner being and your outer expression finally meet as one. Freedom begins here, not in the approval of others, not in the fragile shelter of phrases, but in the courage to let truth be enough. In this state, you no longer reach for "trust me," because trust is woven into the fabric of your presence. You no longer protest "I would never lie," because your life speaks more loudly than your tongue. You no longer lean on "to be honest," because honesty has become the rhythm of your breath. This is rebirth, not dramatic, not loud, but steady, like the dawn spilling over the horizon. And as you step into this rebirth, you discover a peace that lies cannot touch. The constant anxiety of performance dissolves. The fear of being unmasked fades. You no longer live in fragments, but in wholeness. Even your flaws become part of your integrity, for they are no longer hidden. You are no longer a performer before the gaze of others. You are a being at rest within yourself. This is the emotional freedom that Twain's observation ultimately points toward: the liberation from external validation, the shedding of masks, the quiet triumph of simply being true. So let the liar's phrases remind you not of suspicion, but of transformation. Let them call you back to the silence where truth needs no defense. Let them strip away the crutches of performance so that you may stand tall in the unshakable strength of authenticity. For in the end, freedom is not found in words, but in presence. And presence, once aligned with truth, makes you untouchable. The liar trembles because he fears exposure. The truthful soul stands still because he has nothing to hide. This is the essence of peace. This is the power that cannot be stolen. This is the life beyond masks.